We'll call the meeting back to order, and we are at item 9.2 for 1 o'clock, the Perini Subdivision. And Mark is here, and Tracy let me know that there is no one coming on behalf of the subdivision. Item 9.2.
Well, good afternoon, Council. Perini Subdivision, so we presented information on this previously, and the direction from Council at that time was to go back and do some data collection on what kind of traffic statistics we were looking at, what kind of speeds we were talking about. And so therefore, before you today, the residents, the nine households out there, have all signed a letter requesting a reduction in the speed limit from 50 kilometers an hour to 30 kilometers an hour. From these statistics collected by our Municipal Enforcement Department utilizing one of the speed spies, there was a total of 411 vehicles recorded. If you look at the information provided by Municipal Enforcement to me, they had some doubts in some of those statistics, thinking that some of the vehicles may have come in and out of the radar and been captured more than once. With that, however, 411 vehicles over a 5-day period with an average speed of 27 kilometers an hour. Maximum speed recorded was 63 kilometers an hour, which is 13 kilometers an hour above the existing speed limit. And what you typically look at in this instance is the 85th percentile, so what 85% of the traffic is traveling at, which is recorded at 43 kilometers per hour or 7 kilometers an hour below the existing posted speed limit. That 85th percentile, speed at which 85% of the traffic has been recorded to be traveling at or below along a road under free flow conditions, and is generally associated with the setting of speed limits for the area. I don't know if there's really much more for me to say. I've got the facts that were collected, given some reference information from what I found online about speed limits, habits of the motoring public, and how generally as a motorist you travel at a speed that is comfortable to you, that you believe is not endangering yourself or others. And I think that's reflected by the 85th percentile of the traffic traveling in the area. The other component to this is I have done nothing with direction at this time from municipal enforcement to increase the presence or even be present within the subdivision, because I wanted to get through this process first to find out what council's direction was before doing anything out of what we've been doing to date. I'd like to remind council we have 2 community peace officers on staff. We have a very large county to patrol. We also have our partnerships between the town of Bazzano, villages of Rosemary and Dutchess, Eastern Irrigation District, the frequency for what our CPOs could actually get around and deal with 37 residential subdivisions, the other subdivisions, industrial, commercial, as well as our hamlets is very infrequent. And prior to the request of the residents, the department had not received any complaints regarding speed in the area. So at this time, the recommendation is that more or less based on the 85th percentile, I believe that council should keep the posted speed limit at 50 kilometers an hour, knowing that the 85th percentile is traveling at 43 kilometers per hour in the subdivision.
Thanks, Mark. Questions? Tracy.
So where I was kind of going with this was that this request is a one-off. I haven't come across one. Like, I don't remember ever hearing that we had a request like this to reduce the speed. Because the majority, all of the residents are requesting this, they've all signed the letter. I would like to go ahead and process this by changing it down to the 30 kilometer an hour. We do have some data over a short period of time, which, you know, it gives you an idea. But I'd also like to suggest to our enforcement staff to, when the opportunity arises, if they could put the speed spies back in place for a longer period of time to collect data on the times that there is the higher rate of speed, and then work on education and enforcement. If the residents are the ones that are in fact going over the speed limit, then they're the ones that requested the reduction. So I understand what Mark's saying as far as enforcement, but if we gather the data, they could kind of maybe coordinate sometimes to be a presence in that area.
So if I understand you right, you want to go down to 30 and then keep track? And no, I'm completely opposed to that. I think staff did an excellent job explaining why we should keep it at 50, and I want to keep it at 50. Any other comments or questions? Ellen?
Just wondering, from the department, is there any other mitigation ideas that could be presented, for example, i.e. Signs that watch our children, we love our pets, that sort of thing? I mean, in my division, I know some people have it on their private properties, and I bet you they've been there for 15 years, very good shape, and, that might help.
So I think I've been around this subject a few times in my tenure with the county. Children at play signs, the department has a very difficult time suggesting that as a factor or mitigating factor, because we don't promote children playing on roads. It's acreage. I think you got lots of land for your children to play on. They should be supervised at times. I know everybody likes to learn to ride a bike and stuff like that, but that should be a supervised kind of event. I did give some of the mitigation factors or things that can be done in the future if council so wishes to do this with residential subdivisions. Obviously, we have to be aware we're in rural Alberta, so how many of these things can we implement? What can actually be done that doesn't create additional operational challenges? But narrower roads, windy roads, some of those things can be the mitigating factors. Other than that, like I'll give the reference to living in the city of Brooks. All residential zones are posted at 50 kilometers an hour unless there is a playground present. I know that the city posted a 30 kilometer an hour zone representing playground around the south end of Lake Stafford, where there are houses that back onto the lake, as well as on the other side of the road. That 30 zone is no longer in effect because none of the motorists gave any relationship because there's no visible playground to the fact. I think curves in the roads, generally when you can't see far enough ahead, you as the motorist still make a decision as to how fast you can safely drive that if somebody were to step out from behind a vehicle or something like that. I know that when you get to the big cities of Calgary and Phoenix, if you ever look at it on Google Earth, there are subdivisions literally developed in circles on the map, and that's just a natural traffic calming measure that they have put into the engineer design. So if that is something that council will be more interested in when somebody comes forward with a residential or some kind of subdivision proposal, that's something that we would have to look at in the design and layout and configuration of those things at time of subdivision.
Any other comments, Brian?
Oh, do I have some comments? So I guess the first one that I would suggest, and take it tongue-in-cheek, is just stop grading so you got a bunch of washboard. Natural speed decreasing mechanism. So I struggle with this a little bit because we've asked the residents for their opinion, and they've given it to us. That they overwhelmingly, unanimously, I believe, wanted a reduction. So from that point, I would support Tracy's motion. However, irregardless of a 30 kilometer an hour speed zone, is it going to make people drive 30 kilometers an hour? Because quite honestly, we do not have the resources with our peace officers to be having them stationed there more than probably an hour a year. And that's quite realistic. So what are you going to catch in an hour a year? So what are you asking people to do? Change the speed limit so they can break the law? So with that, I guess it would be, you know, if you were, I'm not sure if it's ever been explored, the use of photo radar. I'm not a big fan of it, but I've had pictures in my backyard, in the back of my truck. So, but I mean, I guess that, like, what do is that a logical conclusion that you say, okay, well, let's support 30, but we're going to enforce it with photo radar because it doesn't impact our staffing and our ability to deliver something. And but if we're not going to do that, then I would not support the 30 kilometer an hour. I would go to the 50 kilometer an hour. So I've thrown a lot of stuff at you, but the reality is that unless we're just going to leave it for washboard and you know, really, if we're going to go to the 30, we have to do something else to enforce it, because otherwise we're just turning everybody into lawbreakers. So at least I think so.
I have a big problem with these one-offs. Generally, our subdivisions are not 30, and now we're going to have one that is 30. And that just is almost like a speed trap. And we witnessed that in the city, like you mentioned, with that Stafford Lake. There was no reason to have that at 30. And all it did was collected some money for them. Because it was non-typical. There was no reason, there was no rationale for having it at 30. This one, maybe a little bit, maybe, but it's only local traffic. They're doing it to themselves. I don't think there's very much public traffic that uses that roadway. Almost none. I'm not in favor of lowering it. I'd leave it at 50.
I guess we can sit back and speculate who drives down that road or not, but unless we're sitting at the driveway, we don't know. From the residents' point of view, there definitely is more traffic than the residents. So that was one of their concerns, that, you know, people do come out there, so, and that they are traveling, because some visitors don't realize that it's a dead-end road. Now, having said that, there is a new sign up there that says cul-de-sac. So, and I think during that there was no complaints before was because the signage was just installed, right? So then that's where we had the concerns that come up. Then people are going, oh, well, speed limits are going to be broken, right? It's everywhere. So it is your own choice. And if you do make the choice to speed and you get caught, well, it's your own fault. So again, I just go back, it's one area they've deemed that there is speeding, that it's not all they're doing, that there's outsiders, and I don't see the harm in changing it.
Comments? So did you want to put that into a motion, Tracy, and we'll call the question? It would be to reduce the posted speed limit from 50 to 30 as requested by residents. Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? The motion is defeated. So, is 85% enforced, like when people obey the law 85% of the time, and as far as speeding, saying that's a pretty good, like if you reduced the speed to 30, would it still be at 85%, or would it be?
I think that's part of the information that I found online that I referenced is, even if we posted it at 30, the misconception is that people are going to drive no more than 50. What I did include the reference from the Ecos Research 2005 report, that from the definitional standpoint, many people believe that while they might be technically speeding, they are not driving in a way that endangers themselves or others. So even if it's 30, we could still see some of them touching on 63 kilometers an hour. Now, I didn't get that deep into the details, but that was a 24-hour monitoring period with the speed spies. Maybe 63 kilometers an hour is at 11:30 at night. Maybe it's at noon. Maybe somebody's running home for lunch. I didn't get that far into the details. We just looked at the high-level stuff. I do believe Tracy's accurate that if we monitor it, we can find those targeted times to go out there and hopefully change the attitude of the motorist. But from what we've evidenced ourselves down inside the hamlets, when we we move those electronic speed signs into the community, people aren't quite used to it. They're still driving their normal habits. All of a sudden, speed flashes up and they're in excess of 50. All of a sudden, over a period of a week, you start to see those speeds come down. And then about a week later, when people find that they don't have anything received in their mail, they start to go and do the other thing, and they start to revert back to their old habits because there's been no repercussions of it. And so that's kind of the misconception of thinking that if you post it at 30, people will only drive 40. Well, that's not true, because motorists are going to drive what they believe is a safe speed to drive. And if enforcement isn't there to catch you, which we have 1,700 kilometers of road out there, you're going to drive however you feel is safe to do so.
Of course, Mark just made an argument for no speed limits.
I actually read quite a few reports on the states about the no speed limits, and that being the thing, because when people feel that they're traveling at the same speed as others, which if most people are speeding on the interstate, then why have speed limits at all? And then you hear from people that it's the slow motorist that causes the accident. So yes, there's too much reading out there, too many people studying the same thing over and over, but there is a lot of information out there, and I'll say that, you know, every instance is unique to itself. In this case, we're dealing with a dead-end subdivision, approximately 800 meters in length, and it's not the only residential subdivision that's like that in Newell, which is why I wrote in there that if we're going to consider one, we should consider all. People become familiar with it's a residential area. I know that I'm supposed to drive 50 kilometers an hour. I can honestly say that when I travel through Rolling Hills, you are on Highway 875/525 on the east-west route. It's difficult for me to travel at 40 kilometers an hour. The sign generally flashes at me unless I have that conscientious effort that I am in Rolling Hills. It's 40. So that's how those habits get built, right?
We'll go on to the Planning and Development Report, item 10.1. Oh,
Yeah, do you need a motion motion of resolution as to what we're doing? Because that motion was defeated. I'm not sure of the true process.
doesn't everything stay the same then?
I don't know. How do you do that?
I don't think it would be necessary. There was a motion made, it was defeated, it's status quo.
Yeah, we don't have to reinforce that it's 50 because we're not changing it. Okay, Planning and Development Report, item 10.1.
Hi, I don't have it up here anymore, sorry, but I would just like to present it as is, and if there's any questions, I'm here to answer.
Are there any questions? Anne-Marie?
Maria, there was an open house in Bazzano for a solar project. Did people show up? Was there opposition to this solar project?
That's a good question. I actually don't know the outcome of the project, but we did hear from the Bazzano Solar Company this morning because they submitted a development permit application. And we are just waiting on some more information to complete that application, and they're hoping by the end of January. So they are probably just tying up some loose ends, that public hearing being, or that open house, pardon me, being part of that.
Actually, does Kelly? No, I did not go. You were there. I spoke to the mayor. Go ahead.
So I did attend, And at the time that I was there from 5 to 6, there was 4 people come through the door, mostly asking questions. The conversation was very pleasant, and the name of the project, although it's still under discussion because I threw a curveball at them, is called Sun Alta Power, and it's in Latham. It is a very small 77-acre parcel, 4.7 megawatts. And I have a pamphlet that I can, and also a plan, a development plan, so I'd be happy to send that around. And it had 1 more hour. I believe the open house was, I can read it right here. It was, 2 more hours. So I left at 6 o'clock, so it went from 6 till 8 after that. That's what I can share with you. I'll send this around for anybody who wants to look at it.
And the concern I heard, and it was just because that was the night of the Christmas magic thing, and it was a great night to have it, but apparently there weren't a lot of people had, there was a wee little thing in the Bazano Times about it. I actually read about it after it was over, and there was a concern that it hadn't been very well publicized, but I said I think there's rules that they have to follow as to who's notified, so yeah.
So you know, all the landowners within a certain distance get mailbox invitations, and that did happen because those ratepayers were there and they advised that they did receive it. So perfect. People like me and you wouldn't get that, but
No.
Mm-hmm. So the name of the ultimate name is still up in the air. We might get our name on that one.
Anything else from the report? All right, we need a motion to accept it then. Clarence moves. All in favor? Thanks, Maria. Interim budget, item 10.2, or we can do, let's go, Mark is here, so, no?
Matt will be down in a few minutes. There's a couple of other items there. Shortgrass Library.
Yeah, we'll go on to that. A tax deferral request then. 10.3, Shortgrass Library System.
Yeah, so this one's fairly straightforward. Councillor Christman had indicated that there was a reduction in the Shortgrass Library System budget that was going to be submitted. It has come through. They are talking about a reduction that has been approved by the board. So in accordance with past practices, the library board budgets have been reviewed and approved by council. It is going to be included in the budget document that is going to be presented by Matt.
So we have, so there's, we need a motion then, okay.
Yeah, motion to approve the 2% reduction.
All right. Kelly will make that motion. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And we'll go to the tax deferral request from Torxen.
Maybe we can wait till Matt's in for this one as well.
Okay. The next one is the Manager of Finance 2 Policy Review. Regional Disaster Planning. Should go to that one?
That would be fine. Stuart's here as well. So we've had, there has been a number of things that have come up in the past about recent changes to the Emergency Management Act and the impact that those changes are having on municipalities. We've already approved, or council has already approved, an updated emergency management bylaw. We've had a discussion with each of the urban communities within the county as well, about the impact that those changes in the Provincial Act is having on their operations too. The 3 smaller urban municipalities have each submitted a formal request that consideration be given to establishing a regional emergency management initiative, whereby they would essentially reassign or delegate their responsibilities under the Emergency Management Act to a joint agency. And the discussions before council today is whether that's something that you are prepared to consider and want to have administration proceed with the measures that would be required to put that wheel in motion. What the final outcome would end up being, if it is approved in the end, there would be one Director of Emergency Management that would represent all of the municipalities involved. It's still unknown at this point whether the city is going to want to be involved in this particular initiative, but if the city doesn't get involved, then at least it would be the county, Bassano, Dutchess, and Rosemary, and there would be one Director of Emergency Management, there would be one Emergency Management Agency, there would be a combined Emergency Advisory Committee, so that those processes that are required by each municipality, they wouldn't be duplicated across each municipality. There would basically be one system in place that meets the needs of all participating municipalities. That's really what it's about, and we're just wondering if council's wanting us to move ahead with that.
So basically the details are to be determined, but you want to go ahead in principle if council feels this is the right way to proceed.
Correct. There's no point in us spending time moving in that direction if it's not something that council's prepared to take on.
Right.
There would be impacts for the organization. It is going to be accepting a level of responsibility for managing disaster events, for the planning function for those communities. It's not something that you would be doing and not have any impact on the organization, but it probably makes sense and would certainly align with steps that have been taken in the past to engage in regional initiatives.
Kelly?
So a little bit tongue-in-cheek, do we need to take this to the ratepayers?
Big tongue-in-cheek. Anne-Marie?
So if I remember correctly, we have our setup with Stuart being a big part of it. Now, if we're going to add 4 or maybe 5 communities to it, so 2 questions. Will Stuart still be able to do all that on his own? And will those other 4 or 5 communities help us reduce the cost that we have now?
So there's 2 questions in there. One is the impact that it's going to have on the staff resources. And until we really get into it and understand what the full scope is going to be, that is unknown at this point. I would think that if the city chooses to get involved, that changes the scope considerably, and it may require a rethink on how much we can absorb without there being additional staff resources available for that. With regards to the other matter, we would have to go back and redo the bylaw that was just passed by council. There would be an agreement that would be required between the county and the municipalities that choose to get involved. We've already gone down that path. Our needs are being met right now, but if we choose to look after the needs of the others, we would have to back up and redo some of those steps that we've already completed.
Wayne?
Yeah, if we had to back up and redo some of that stuff, who would be in charge of doing that, Stuart?
The expectation from those communities are that they would be looking to the county to take the lead on that. So it would be Stuart and myself that would work through the setup process.
Brian?
Well, and I think that's a logical way to look at it from their point of view. Why wouldn't you? The question that I have is similar to Anne Marie's as far as who's covering them. If there's additional training and costs involved, my expectation would be that they would share that as the size of their municipality would dictate, so based on population. And so this is the other part of this question is, would the liability aspect be covered off in it? So my example would be if there was a disaster in one of these communities and we are the lead body that's dependent on managing that emergency, that there's no recourse to come back and question the way it was handled, and that the county and our staff is liable for any things that they would perhaps, and maybe that's overthinking it, but I think it has to be a concern.
I like the liability thought, but I don't want to jump to conclusions about how the costing would be figured out, so just yet, because I'm not sure, just because you're big or small, what the work involved is. Anyhow, money may be involved, I think, is what you were getting at. But liability?
In most agreements, there is a save harmless clause that's inserted where a municipality commits to not taking action against another if there is a problem that results from the administration of the agreement. I would expect that in this situation it would be a given that would be required as well. If there is an agreement that's put in place, what would end up happening, those smaller communities would essentially be appointing Stewart as their director of emergency management. Each of those communities would have to approve their own disaster response plan, but it would basically be the same as what we would have in place after having consulted with them. So that plan becomes, in essence, their plan, and they're simply delegating the administration of it and the response to the county. Having acknowledged that it is their plan that they have adopted, I think that the concerns about the liability or the potential for liability would be addressed, but we can certainly make sure that is reviewed by legal advice so that there isn't going to be an increased level of liability that we're just not prepared to accept.
Other questions? Kelly?
So, two things. I wanted to ask Stuart how he felt about it. And secondly, suggest possibly that this be an add-on to the fire agreement or an addendum or funded the same way as the fire agreement, something like that, because it is emergency management. Anyway, I want to hear your thoughts, Stuart.
I think I got it now. There we go. Yeah, very good question. I'm always eager to help communities and do what I have to do to make those communities better and stronger. I would certainly take that challenge on. I think there's no delusions that it's definitely going to be more work. It'll be on a much grander scale, dealing with the 3 different municipalities that have to come together with the other 6 that I deal with already. So, is it going to be that much different? If I'm dealing with 6, what's the difference if we go to 9, right? So I think I would be able to handle it and would be willing to take that on.
Leading into my next comment, do you see that it could be could work with our already set up committees in those municipalities, or do you see it as a whole new committee and another set of meetings for you to attend?
I would imagine it would probably be a whole new committee and a different set of meetings. There's different topics to discuss when it comes to emergency management, rather than dealing with the fire departments and budgets and stuff like that. So I would say that it's probably a whole separate meeting just for planning on exercises and all those different things. So.
So, Madam Reeve, I think an ideal situation would be that there would be one committee that would be set up and trained that would include the smaller communities and the hamlets as a part of the plan, and that we don't have any duplication whatsoever. And in the event of an emergency, that committee gets activated, and maybe the community halls are listed as the activation point or whatever is going to be. But I would strongly discourage creating any duplication with this process, because you can count on one hand the communities, the 360 some communities that have had a disaster in the last 20 years. So the chances of getting something happen are pretty slim. Not to say it can't happen, but I wouldn't put a lot of duplicate effort into this other than getting the committee trained to meet the legislation and move forward.
All right, so Lane has provided a recommended action that we agree to proceed in principle. And there's still lots to figure out, particularly with the city and how that would work, but for them, given the guidance, to go ahead and continue to have a look at it. So somebody want to make that motion for us? Wayne, any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thanks, Stuart. And Lane? Okay. We will go back to item 10.2.1, the interim budget. Roberta and company, are you guys here for the budget or for something else? 10.7? Okay. I'm just trying to figure, thank you, I couldn't find it. Just trying to figure out, I don't want to keep people waiting too long. Is this budget discussion going to be, I don't think it'll be too long. It's funny how I just associate IT and money. Like,
Good one. Hey.
Sorry, guys. I thought, well, budget? Am I missing something?
We got to rein that in.
So they may as well sit and listen.
This is my first day with the old friend. This is kind of nice, right? All right, so I think it was a record this year getting through interim budget, so thank you. It's been relatively quiet. I have summarized, there have been a few changes that we've rolled into the interim. This isn't our first rodeo, so I think we're all clear on the fact that this is just interim. We haven't set tax rates. We know you just got an email about the police costing model. So there will be some items that we need to roll into our final budget in the new year. We'll have greater clarity about assessed values at that time as well. So interim, work in process, but we do need to pass an interim budget to move into the next year. Highlights some of the impacts that decreased our revenue. So grant in lieu, the province came through and said, well, you can tax us what you want, but we'll give you maybe 75 cents on the dollar. So not a huge impact to us, but it does drop revenues a bit. And then them saying they're going to hang on to a few more of the fine revenue dollars, shaved off about 8,500. Had mentioned that we were going to remove that additional part-time position from admin. We've updated benefit rates, which came in. That saves us a little bit there. Some impacts for the new vehicle locating system, plus minus. Ag for Life donation, where we had a separate motion. Overall, we're looking at, we've saved $8,200 from when we met last. So that's, at the end of the day, we're looking for just over 5.7 million coming from reserves to balance our budget, which when you consider, I think we've got just over 6 in the budget for the provincial paving. You know, maybe that's not too bad to be robbing that much out to get that initiative done. Key assumptions, I'm really happy with the budget that we were able to present. I think it does come in conservative. It does show some restraint, responsive to the economy that we're in. We've removed 3.6 FTEs. We're looking for no increase currently in municipal taxes from residential property. We're expecting to take a hit on non-residential of about 2.5 million. Slight increase to farmland. So if you've got the best irrigated farmland in Alberta, assessed at $450 per acre, the extra 0.75 mil will tack $54 onto your tax bill. So not a huge gain there, but we are making progress with our farmland taxes. We always go conservative on the revenue side, right? Conservative on revenue, try to be a little more aggressive on the expense side. We've rolled in utility rate increases in the fee for the minibus, and cost recovering a little bit more on our dust abatement services. COLA is at 2% for both union and non-union employees. You've got the summaries there in front of you. Not too much has changed there, plus or minus. So really, unless there's specific questions or surprises have come up, I guess we're in a position to potentially approve the 2020 interim budget.
Clarence, do you have it? No?
I'll move approval of the interim budget.
Okay. Keeping in mind this is an interim budget, Clarence has made the motion to approve it. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thanks, Matt. The Torxen energy we left as well, although we're familiar with this from last year.
Yeah, so if you'll recall, last year I think it was Reeve Douglas who asked, is this just for 2019? Apparently not.
Got an answer now.
So
that's okay.
Yeah. Fortunes haven't really improved for our gas producers, so received an email from their CFO asking if we could do the same kind of agreement moving into 2020. They've been a pretty good customer in 2019. They've made their payments. So it's well within council's purview to approve the agreement. I'd suggest it may be in our interest. It's really net no cost to us. The way that I've laid out the payment plan, the interest we earn leading up to the typical deadline is enough to offset what you would have lost if you received it all in June and earned interest on the total balance. So it's not a lot extra to manage. It's one company. If we have a dozen or more coming, then maybe we start having a more serious conversation about an actual installment program, putting that into place. But I really don't have a ton of appetite for turning one payment across multiple customers into 12 over the year. I think anything we can do to simplify administration at the county is a win for us. We have a pretty good tax collection rate. I think we're at 97.9% collected for this year. So, and there's a couple of big delinquents. So that's not to say we're not at risk on some of our oil and gas guys, but we do, for the most part, collect well with the current system that we have in place. So that's maybe chasing squirrels. So back to the question at hand is whether we want to entertain Torxen's request.
I appreciate that they're coming ahead of time again, and I'd like to make the motion as recommended by staff that administration be authorized to enter into an individual tax payment agreement with Torxen.
All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And policy review 2019 pad 059.
Employment standards are always fun to wrap your head around, where you've got multiple employee classes at the county, who's entitled to what, who's not. So back effective January 1st, 2018, the previous provincial government came in and they changed the rules on banking overtime. So previous to that time, we could bank hour for hour. Previous government said, well, that needs to change. If you're entitled to overtime under the standards and you're going to bank your overtime, it has to be at time and a half. So for a brief period of time, there was a handful of employees at the county who got that extra time and a half going into their bank. New government, new rules. They said, actually, you don't have to bank at time and a half. We're going back to the way it was. So that's probably the biggest item in here is elimination of the flexible averaging agreements, which did let us, it was a small window that did allow us to bank hour for hour if the employee requested to work overtime. So this is a welcome change. I'm happy to see the FAA get tossed. It's one less agreement we need to have in place with our employees, one less bank we need to manage, and back to overtime for those who are entitled to it at hour for hour. I've summarized the impacts there for you. Really, there's no financial impact to eliminating the FAA. It's beneficial to us on the admin side of things. And then there was, like I said, a handful of employees who had banked a bit there. So in 2018, put 125 in, turned into 187. So there's 60 hours of productivity we potentially get back, and similar in 2019 there. So really, we don't have a choice on the FAA. We can't enter into those agreements moving forward. Council could choose to let people continue to bank at time and a half. Luxury, once enjoyed, sometimes becomes necessity, right? But we're recommending that we go back to the way things were.
All right, discussion or motion? Anne-Marie?
I have a question about the personnel policy and whether this would be the right time to maybe add something for disabilities. There's nothing in this policy at all that addresses that issue. So would this be the time to do that, or is that something we can do soon, later?
I'd suggest that could be a later item. So if council wants to provide administration with direction to explore disability benefits, what's out there, what's maybe the best way to structure some of those things. So depending on what we cover, there can be taxable benefit implications. Do you need to deduct CPP, EI, those kinds of things? So I think it's probably worth being thoughtful about. It's probably a good opportunity for us to maybe be progressive on an issue. But I think it would probably warrant more brain power than I have available for you at the table today.
So we can maybe get this updated and give direction and another motion. Clarence?
I move that we approve the updated personnel policy as presented.
All right. Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And did you want to, could we give direction with a motion? Anne-Marie, did you want to? do that?
Do you want to do it by motion, or could it just be direction and we approve it when it comes back?
I'm absolutely fine with direction, but you know me and motions these days.
No, I like direction.
Okay. Direction received, given, I guess, received by Matt. Thank you, Anne-Marie and Matt. We'll let you work on that one. And that moves us on to the item 10.7, the Public Sector Digest. Join us at the table with your exciting update.
Hi. Hey. Get up here. I don't know what they're doing. I want Mark up here too. Come on, Mark. Oh, you turkey. So it's a real pleasure for us to be able to announce to Council that we did receive the results of the GMI survey for 2019. And we did quite well, we think. So first, in organizations of our size for our GIS program. Fourth in Alberta, it was a little disappointing. We were third last year, but we got bumped to fourth. But I think we had a worthy opponent who beat us out, so that's okay. We're behind the City of Calgary, City of Leduc, and Strathcona County. So I thought that was pretty good. 11th in Canada, and they expanded it this year, and we were 11th in North America. So I was really pleased with that. So we maintained our ranking of 11th. When I talked to them, they said not everybody is able to do that. They changed the questions a bit. There were more people in different areas involved, so they were actually quite impressed with that. And we increased our score from 80.91% to 84.1%. So I was pleased with that. It meant we've grown. So Constantine is a big part of our success. Steve is a great part of our success, and our GIS stakeholders team that's where Mark comes in. Mark, look interested. He's not interested. So I think we've put together a real strong structure that works for the organization and the stakeholders, and to have this reflect that, we're very pleased with that, and I hope that Council is too. Constantine, Steve, do you have anything you want to contribute?
Guys are so laid back, modest, humble, which is a wonderful way to be, for sure. Steve, did you want to add anything? But he didn't turn his mic on, so he might have to say it all over again for us. I just want to know, I read through this because I want to talk more to people about this, but I don't understand it as well as I should. So how do you get involved with this? How do these 127 public sector organizations, like, is that all there are that sign up, or how does this work?
So the invitation is circulated to all kinds of public sector organizations across Canada and the US. It's quite a long survey. The first year there were 77 questions. It took us a while to do it the first year. Second year they changed it. It had 85 questions, but we were much quicker because we had answered a majority of the questions. A lot of the survey questions are not just our responses. We can't just say, yeah, we do this, or no, we don't do that. We actually have to produce something that's evaluated by a team of GIS specialists. So this component looks at things like your readiness, your implementation and the impact your GIS program has had. So we were really strong in impact. I think that's because we measure things, so they really liked our GIS policy that we have in place. They like our governance structure with our GIS committee, stakeholders committee, and their involvement. I think there are areas, we get a report after this that tells us how well we scored and to let us know where we can improve. And so we've identified those things and we work to improve them every year. And then this year they've actually offered another service where they'll compare us from our last year's score to this year's score. And you think, you know, sometimes you have this and we think, oh, that's great. I think Constantine and I, you might be able to tell, are a little more demonstrative of our excitement. And we're like, oh, I wonder how we're going to do this year, Constantine. And we're on pins and needles and waiting. Steve's much more reserved about it. Stakeholders committee, I don't even know if they cared. But we were all excited. But you wonder, does anybody else care? Does anybody else see it? And last year, we actually got a call from Regina, the city of Regina. They wanted to know what we were doing as it related to GIS. We were also contacted by the city of Medicine Hat, and they wanted to know what were the things that we were doing, because they had noticed how we had done. And Matt shared with me that he had been in a demo for a certain software earlier this year, like just a few days ago or a week ago. And the guy says, well, you know, you need to have certain things in place. You need to have this, and GIS, but we all know how your guys' GIS is, and he just kind of kept going. So even they noticed. So the vendors noticed and other municipalities noticed. So that was, I mean, it's just kind of nice. I don't mind bragging when I have success because I have a lot of failures too. So I like to celebrate the successes. So I'll try to rein that in a bit. But I think it was hard work. I'm not going to lie. Our GIS, we put a lot of work in it as an organization. And I know we asked you guys for support in some initiatives, and you provided that. And so I think it's a win-win for all of us.
For the average person reading about this or trying to understand it, GIS stands for Geographic Information Systems, correct? I'm lucky if that is correct. Yeah.
You are correct.
But what all does that mean to a local government like ours?
Good question. So everybody uses it. We have a public web map that we hope the public can see. We have an internal web map that allows us to be able to do our jobs out in the field from home. It allows us to do analytics. I think we use it here in the council chambers. When you're making decisions about things, development uses it. They have to understand and make decisions about the closest, you know, how close a well site is, how close it is to wetlands, how close things are to a major highway. All those are development considerations. The GIS information allows that stuff to be accessible much quicker. We can be more responsive to the public when they have these questions. I think that we use it a lot in planning our projects moving forward, and that's actually a direction we want to go, is to have an operational dashboard. We can start tracking jobs to know where everything is at, how well we've done it, efficiencies that come into play. We also use it for statistical information that's needed by the financial system. We use it for asset management. It links in with our asset management. You guys, do you have some more? You probably have better insight into me, how and who all it touches.
So, we use GIS for planning, for municipal services planning as well. So, basically everywhere. The power of GIS is basically compiling the spatial and tabular data, and then it gets alive. That's very short.
We just approved an interim budget. How did GIS help bring that budget together to us?
That's a good question. So how does GIS bring in the budget or assist with the budget? I know that GIS brings in our efficiencies. So when people go out in the field, they collect using a GPS unit, and they're going to collect all the different features and assets that we have out in the field. When that gets uploaded, and we upload it live, it used to be at one time that people would go out and collect with their GPS unit. It would have to come into the office. It would then be given to the GIS analyst, who would then have to upload it. Then it was at that time that it would become available to operations. We don't need to do that anymore. They go out into the field, they update GIS information, it automatically gets uploaded, and they can see it live up as it goes. That information then, once it gets there, we can press a button, and that button sends all that information into our asset management system. From our asset management system, this is where we can start doing inspections on assets. It's all originating from that data collection out in the field. We also use that information not just for our own services, but it's to provide emergency services. So we have an GIS update schedule that Constantine is responsible to maintain. It says, where is the GIS data held? How often do we update it? Where does it go once we get it? So he has to send information to an open source called AMDSP, and don't ask me what it stands for. I'd have to look it up. But that information is provided, and we provide it annually, and the fire, police, and ambulance services all use that information to deliver their service. So it's used, I know it's used to route emergency services. It's used for asset management purposes, and it's used for programs and services and delivering those services. I know the information then also, like I said, for financial statistical. So it's not the FIR, what's it called? Kevin, you know. It's for the statistical information return. SIR? Got it. So all the information, Constantine pulls that. It's also for the decisions that council's making regarding boundaries. We use that to statistical information, census information, when we propose different budget, boundaries, for electoral boundaries, for fire boundaries. It's all that statistical or geospatial analytics that puts those things together and gets used for the decision making of the council, as well as operations.
Clarence.
So I'm looking at the list of our competitors, and I see County of Newell is the first one in line when we're at the 51 to 100 employees. And there's no one else until we get to number 22, and 22 is tied. And one is the County of Kings, so I mean, that's pretty good company, isn't it? But I guess, so I think it really tells you something that you're doing a fairly impressive job. I think it's probably, when I can gather of it, it's probably more important for areas that are perhaps higher in population and higher in service capacity, more people. I mean, most of the cities have over 1,000 employees, so it becomes, to have that computerized is probably more important than what it is when you're smaller. But I think the other part of it is that no one person can keep all this stuff either on a piece of paper or mentally take it and keep it in track. How much of it is also due to the fact that we have the resources to do what we need to do, or we'd like to do? There's got to be a balance there too. I mean, there's a need, and there's also the fact, do you have the resources to do it? And you have to have the people to do it, obviously. You have to have people who understand this and work it. And so I think we've just been very fortunate, and I think I don't want to minimize the fact that when I look at the size and we're just about alone, it also means that we have some very good people there doing with, we are fortunate to have the resources, but you have to have the people that use those resources in a manner. So I'm pretty proud. You guys should be proud. So congratulations, I think, are definitely in order.
Thanks, Clarence, for that nice little summary of it. It is amazing. Kelly.
My question is around capacity. I think about some agencies that we're affiliated with and how this information could benefit them. Can you speak to that a little bit? Whether it was contracted out or in-house. I think specifically about FCSS and tracking service delivery, that sort of thing. I know from the business that this would be valuable for planning purposes.
I think there's a lot of focus on open source, so allowing information to be available for other organizations to use it and to have it as an open source, like AMDSP is. Anybody can go in there and get our information related to roads and being able to use that information. Capacity, I'm guessing you mean service capacity and the ability to use it. So I have to say that the principles that we brought in about efficiencies and finding ways to be efficient, incremental improvements, and practicing those things went a long way. We had 2 GIS people, and we had a GIS system for many years. But sometimes the challenge is the way we're using things or simple structure changes. The policy was important to understand that I think. So maybe I'm talking about my personal opinions here, you guys, so take that with a grain of salt. I think that as a team, we recognized where our gaps were. I think we recognized our challenges and our frustrations, and we found ways, and yes, some of it costs money, but a lot of the things that made a difference in the GIS program didn't cost money. And that's one of the principles of incremental improvement, is incremental changes and improvements don't have to be big, and they don't have to cost a lot of money. And I think for GIS, and yeah, you won't believe me, Molly, but I think a lot of the changes in IT were not because of money, although money had a big part in a lot of areas. But you can throw as many people as you want or as much money as you want at anything, and you're not going to necessarily have success from that. It takes a lot of things. So I think where the county could particularly, and where I'm personally proud of this achievement, is in the programs and the structures, the GIS update schedule, the centralized location of our data. These are the things that they monitor. Do we have SLAs in place, service level agreements with users? Do we have a centralized location? Those changes that we made, and we needed help to understand where our structure was falling down, and that's where the contractors came into place to help us build the structure. But it was those simple changes that anybody, I believe, can do really help to go a long way to have success. So you do need a certain amount of money, a certain amount of expertise, but then you have to be willing to maybe evaluate and change the way you do things sometimes too.
Well, I believe that you can, yes, throw a lot of money, but if you don't have the expertise, like people like are sitting across the table from us, this wouldn't happen. So we really do appreciate your geeky knowledge and your desires to turn it into something that works for all of us non-geeks as well, I think is the most important thing that I see, that this is good for our whole organization, good for our ratepayers, and aside from being able to read about it and how we rate with other communities, a lot depends on people. Fortunately, people still really matter, right? Yeah. There used to be talk, versus AI, I used to think that was just artificial insemination, but now it's, I hear there's something else involved. And yeah, people are important and the way things function. So congratulations to all of you and all that you have done for us. And hopefully we'll continue to do. And guys, I think you need to keep Roberta, because she's definitely the talkative one.
That's a no-brainer.
Thank you so much. Her letter of support comes along following the presentation by the Badlands today, and this was a request that came, and Brian Varga referenced it today in their presentation, that they're trying to get the minister on side, the new minister, Tanya Fur. Yeah, Anne-Marie, do you have anything else you need to say?
No, it's just like Brian said, you know, if we all 61 communities send a letter to the government, hopefully it will help them see how important this organization is. And so, yeah, there's a sample letter, and all we need to do is just send it off.
So we would need a motion to send this letter of support. Hubie wants to make that motion. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Oh, sorry. Tracy.
I just had a question, kind of, Anne-Marie, they had talked about the Destination Market Fund, but how does that, like, I'm still kind of trying to wrap my head around it. Canadian Badlands is doing it, and NRTA is doing it. So is that a duplication of service in our area, or is it something that NRTA could have expanded on wider? Or, like, I don't understand why they're both kind of working on it.
The same money, yeah. Anne-Marie?
The NRTA gets DMF money, Destination Marketing Fund, from Canelta and Heritage. Those two already collected, and they share it with NRTA. What the Canadian Badlands is doing, they want to have the others that are not part of this to also collect it. And that would go to an independent accountant who then shares it with Canadian Badlands, with the hotels themselves, and NRTA could apply to those hotels and to that fund to have more if they want. But they only work with Canelta and the Heritage Inn, but we have more in Brooks, not in the county yet.
NRTA has obviously attempted to get those other hotels on board ahead of this as well.
Correct. And that's why I asked the question too. I thought that these hotels that were asked, that 1% goes to, like with the other hotels, 1% goes to Canadian Badlands, 1% goes to the NRTA, which is a non-profit, which that money has to flow through, and 1% I think is being kept by the hotels for their own production or promotions. So yeah, I was a little bit confused, but they did say that that money will stay in our area, the 2%. However, I don't understand why it is a different committee. I did ask that question earlier, and that it doesn't flow through NRTA, that why it is a separate one altogether. Just curious. So does it, why not keep one, for example? Why both?
NRTA is just local for this area. Canadian Badlands has 61 communities. So it is a little different. And the money from the DMF, from the Heritage and from the Canelta doesn't go directly to NRTA. Like the two hotels, they keep track of that money and they decide where it's going to go.
Correct, but 1% does come into the NRTA books, and the board then decides, right? And of course they are part of it. But I'm just wondering, yeah, if it is a duplication or will it enhance it? I guess we'll have to find out. But you would think that one organization would be sufficient. I don't know if it would take away from the NRTA at all.
What I heard them say is that Canalta is doing their own thing. Canalta and Heritage would not be part of this 3%. That unless they choose to, maybe they will pull out. I mean, this is just, but right now they're going to stay with NRTA. And the others are being invited into this 61 municipality organization. So it's not going to hit the NRTA unless Canalta chooses to go the Badlands route.
But those hotels also pay 1%, you know, to the Canadian Badlands as well. The Heritage Inns and the Canalta hotels, they still give the 1% to Canadian Badlands as well.
Let it unfold. Nothing may change if the hotels aren't into it. We'll move on to item 10.9. Foothills Little Bow, just information on the meeting in February to note in your calendar, or January, I should say. Checks for payment aren't any. So payment register. Any questions? Staff or a motion to approve? Accept. Tracy makes a motion to accept. All in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Request for functions of council. Okay, we'll move on to Mark's report. Highlights from Mark's report.
Highlights. It's winter. We've had some snow, we've had some cold, we've had some warmth, we've had some ice, we've had some rain. Everybody's keeping busy with things. Grader operators really work to try to restore just rutted up roads and stuff still from previous rain and thaw events and stuff. We still got a couple roads out there that we aren't satisfied with, but working with what we can do with the weather. To round out the year for our summer grading services, 8,829.7 kilometers of road surface was graded for the season, or 6.09 rotations across the county. That's up 600 kilometers-ish from previous season in 2018. So Terry's busy tracking how many kilometers of road we grade every single year using the graders that we have and what those rotations look like. So 2019 we had 6.09 rotations, and 2018 we had 5.69 rotations, so I'd say we're pretty consistent. And it's all based on weather, right? If you get more rain, we don't get in as many rotations. If winter stays longer or winter commences earlier, that's kind of the affecting factors there. Truck drivers stockpiling program, responding to winter storm events as things come about for them. Maintenance operators and stuff keeping up with the regular work orders of sign replacements and repairs, and they did the fall cleanup of storm sewer catch basin cleaning and things like that, just getting things really in good shape for winter, and that way nothing gets clogged up in spring or when our Chinooks show up and we have some thaw events and things need to drain, so that's all good. What do we got? Highway 876 paving project shut down for winter, obviously. Things are frozen. So Volker Steven, on behalf of Alberta Transportation, is responsible for the road maintenance throughout the winter shutdown. ISL Engineering is in the process of investigating One Tree Road and the solutions for rehabilitation strategy in the pavement preservation. Alberta Environment has also been supplied with, for a second time, supplemental information to the North Headgates application for Water Act approval with the wetland and stuff, and how the drainage can all work in that area. So it's positive to see that somebody is working on that application now, because it's been a number of months since it's all been submitted. So fingers crossed that maybe by spring we'll have word and we can crack the whip on that project. Municipal enforcement does what municipal enforcement does. They're fulfilling the partner commitments. They're keeping up with monitoring the traffic safety plan priorities for the month. You got the summary of information there. Throughout the month, a number of us have participated in the emergency management training sessions and stuff, making sure that there is redundancy in my side of the organization, municipal services, because we do provide that backup support to emergency services. Sometimes we also have to be there before emergency services gets there, depending on what the weather event and what has to get to where. So myself and Manager of Operations, Municipal Enforcement Officer, which is also the Deputy Director of Emergency Management stuff, have been involved in a bunch of that. We had Jolene go through for the scribe training and stuff, that if we ever have to activate the EOC room, we need to have scribes, we need to have those positions filled and making those decisions as we go. So Fall Convention was obviously in there. That was a good session again, seeing my peers, having the discussion with them. And then we've also been making some progress on our automatic vehicle locating or GPS system on the vehicles so that we know where they are. We are changing service providers with that, and that installation of equipment started today in all of our fleet and equipment and is anticipated to take probably about a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. We'll get some training going on the software side of things and get that all implemented into our daily routines. Aside from that, the permit activity report, I can give you some updates again. Lots of times I fail on the update because I don't receive the report in time for when I draft this. But in November, we had 350 permits taken out. That is actually spot on with what our 2018 November period looked like. We were only a difference of 2. 2017, it was 360, so slightly shy of that. That makes our current year to date 3,204 permits with a forecasted total of 3,495 for the year, pending what happens here in December. With that, statistics are very close to what we had from last year, but we will be up 129 permits if that trend continues. And that's an average of 291 permits per month that's been issued. 2018, there was 280 permits per month issued, and in 2017, it was 284. So I'd say we're pretty flat in what's going on, or consistent, in other words. And you heard from Roberta about what GIS does for us and whatnot. We just completed the Canada's Core Public Infrastructure Survey from 2018 from Statistics Canada. So with that, we get to query how many kilometers of water pipeline we have out there based on what this year's survey said, what size of pipe or what distance of pipes do you have less than 416 millimeters in size. So not only do we have the line work, we have to say what size the pipe is, millimeters, centimeters, imperial being inches or whatever. We have to have those kinds of things in the attribute information behind that data, and then we can run a query and start filling out those surveys in a very timely manner because they are painful, very, very painful. And when you think you get yourself set up to fulfill this survey, somebody comes out with a different survey wanting different information. So when your GIS stuff's all in order, it will make things very efficient for us. We have a lot of data collected. We have a lot of data to collect. So lots of work to do out in that area yet. But with that, we will understand our water, our wastewater, our storm sewer, all of the facilities being the lift stations, the water pumps, the signs, the culverts, the length of culverts, the size of culverts. We'll have the average life expectancy or estimated useful life of a culvert in there. We will be able to start reporting to council exactly where we sit on that service level. If there's 65% of the culverts are in good or fair or excellent condition and stuff based on programs that we've done through budgeting, and work to make sure that we're on top of it, that we're funding things appropriately, and that we are keeping our residents well served for the dollars that they invest in their community. So,
questions? Thanks, Mark.
Not a problem.
Try not to cut off any more thumbs in the
Yep.
next week or before Christmas at least.
Just a motion on the reports, please.
Oh, yes. Back to business, yes. Ellen will make that motion to accept municipal reports. All in favor? Opposed? That's a good word, assume. Post-agenda item is an in-camera item. Just a question I meant to ask Matt, Kevin, or Lane. The police costing that came out yesterday, I guess that was. Oh, do we have an email? Okay. All right, unfortunately.
So our costs will go up to about $850,000 in year 4, and it'll start out at $281. So if the formula would have been based on solely population, our max would have been $685,000. If it would have been solely based on assessment, our max would have been $1 million. So that'll give you kind of an idea.
And the collection of this money doesn't mean that it's all going to be spent within our region.
No, I don't. From what I can see, they didn't follow any of the recommendations, of municipalities that have concerns and service capacities. It's a money grab, yep.
So this, or 2020, 281,000. And so by 24, 850.
I know President Al was asking if the payment could be made in the spring of 2021, but I don't know for sure if that'll be approved or not.
Because this again is another hit on the 2020 budget then.
Yep.
Interesting.
Just more keeps getting downloaded, more and more and more.
I had a ratepayer suggest that we just start spending our bank account before they take it all. And I remember that's exactly what some of the school systems said when they were losing their power, handing it over to the province. All right. Anything else before we move in camera?
Molly?
Oh.
I'm sorry. May I ask a quick question about the policing? Do you know when, is that money effective as of April 1st, 2020?
Yeah, I think it's for the new budget.
You.
All right. A motion to move in camera, please. Lionel will move. All in favor? All right, we're in camera.